wasn't worth what was against it, the amount of money was owed against it. They loaned against it. Same reason some of your savings loan went broke today. They loaned too much money on the property they had in it. They foreclosed. It wasn't worth that amount of money. And that broke the National Life Insurance Company, which was took over, as I said, by Missouri State Life. They didn't have enough to come out because this was all during Depression years.
Oh, yeah.
But then
okay.
when General American come in, and they cleared this land up themselves and brought tenants in. For instance, I can remember in 1936, General American would bring a man in, furnish him teams, tools, equipment, and furnish us enough to live on for a whole year just to get them to farm the land. And 40 acres was a big cotton crop.
Okay. Now, was the land already cleared, or did this land they brought in have to clear?
They had cleared the land. General American had cleared the land at that time. Had it cleared. And some of the land that they had taken over was cleared. Some people lost it after it was cleared to them.
Okay, now we're still talking Depression years, aren't we?
This is Depression years, yes, we're talking about.
And so people were desperate for a place to live and for something to do.
We had people like in this we're talking about in the 30s, 36. I saw people, person after person, come in here from Arkansas, Tennessee, and Alabama, and come into the area out there to rent land from General American, who owned thousands of acres of land in the Bragg City, Deering area, Steele area, all this area up through here. I don't know how many thousands of acres. Mr. Baker was over it. He could tell you about how many acres it was. But they furnished these people money, the necessary money. They didn't have anything. They even paid some of them's moving expense to come in here and do it. And they built houses for them out on these farms. Built a house about, in that time, about on every 40 acres of land, because that's about what a man would farm.
Okay. Now, that man would farm, and what would he raise? Cotton?
Cotton and corn.
Okay. Now, where would he take his cotton?
We're talking about a time when we used mules, so we had to have corn to feed the mules. So he raised cotton and he raised corn. He took the cotton to gins, which was in the area at that time.
Okay.
For instance, there was a gin at Deering. There was a gin at Bakerville.
Now, would the company own the gin?
The company owned these gins.
Did the company own where would they buy their?
They bought their groceries at stores at that time that was owned by the same General American Life Insurance Company, a separate little corporation. But they had a store in Bakerville, had a store in Bragg City, had in those areas where they had. Now, they didn't have them everywhere, but they had them in those places. They didn't have any down in Steele, for instance. They had any up north on farther up. But they furnished them at that time.
Okay, is this a period of time where they would get maybe vouchers? Have I heard about vouchers?
Well, some of them had on a voucher basis, Some of them got little what they called coupons, which was good for, you'd get a $5 book of coupons. And you do that, then later they changed the same way. Gideon Anderson was doing the same thing. Later they changed to what was called brozine, which is a brass.
Brozine, I've heard of that. Now tell me about brozine.
It's a brass money. And they had $5 coin. They had a dollar coin and 50 cents, 25, 10, 5, and a penny. And that would be good at any place at any of the stores that they had.
And they were brass. And
it's a brass type of brass.
And the lumber companies that were developing that area would would make these things.
This is a little later than your lumber companies. Some of your lumber companies did this earlier. This time I'm talking about is in the 30s.
Okay.
After this done, when it was all done.
Okay.
Now, in your early part, I'm sure Gideon Anderson had some of those things where they furnished some of the people.
Okay, now brozine, that's a word. I had forgotten that word.
Brozine came in, only time I ever saw it was in 1937, I think.
Are there any of those still around? Do you think the museum has
some. They've got one. Well, I have one in my office showing all the various coins.
Well, and now we want to look at them. I want to see brozine, and I want to understand.
Then I have also one of those coupon books behind glass, too, that was done.
So that would eliminate having to transfer cash, wouldn't it?
Well, the big thing was, in place of writing tickets at the store, lots of tickets for these various things, you gave the man $100 worth of this so he could buy $100 worth of stuff and just have one charge to him, which he signed for. Then he'd go spend it at the store, and some of them had filling stations even at that time, and some of them had machine shops and places to buy feed stores and so forth.
So the land, but now the men that moved in there, were the stumps already gone?
No, stumps were still there. The first place
How would he get rid of stumps, T.A.?
Well, you just pulled them out with a mule, or you blew them up with dynamite. Back in those days, the first cleared land I can ever remember in that area was just east of Wes Sutton's home. Mr. Drew Vardell took dynamite and blew about a 20-acre strip there, pulled the stumps up, and pulled them up a big cypress sneeze deal up there, and tied them with a piece of cable and set them on fire and burned them. That's where the first cleared land in that area I ever saw. That's where the first airplane I ever saw in my life, incidentally, was lit right there in that same place.
So that's...
Now, this was the first. Now, we came to this country in the 20s when they were putting a road between here and Hayti, gravel on one side and pave on the other. And during that period of time, my little time out on the farm, we raised cotton, and we used single mules, one mule and a man behind the plow, doing all the planting and cultivating and so forth. And we stayed out on the farm till the flood of 1927, where the water got 5 feet deep at Wright's Gin. Right there, the water was 5 feet deep. That took us out of the farming business.
That took a lot of people out of the farming business.
And that was at the time that the Mississippi River and the St. Francis River both broke, and they met about the floodways. All the mail was carried between Kennett and Hayti in the motorboat because the water had washed out the railroad and you couldn't go.
Okay.
And that's where your Bird Point's spillway deal was first put in to kind of be on the Mississippi to take care of. That's when the levees were increased.
Okay.
But we come back on this other, you was talking about this land and the sale of this land. You got to remember now that we're in the summer depression years after some of these scams that were done like Bragg City. Lumber companies didn't keep the taxes up, and there were some taxes on this. I don't know where it was $1 an acre or what it was, total taxes, but whatever it was, they weren't paying them because it was worth nothing. If you own some land out here, wasn't worth anything, you can hoop they didn't want to pay the taxes, didn't want to do it. So as consequent, when you bought this, or they give it to you, I know Wisconsin Lumber Company gave some of this land away because we saw records where they did it. And also, I know of some people that went out and paid $1 an acre, for instance, this land in order to get it. But then they had to pay the taxes on top of that. I had a friend of mine out at Deering who was a school teacher, and he was telling me the story about he had an opportunity to swap a Jersey cow that he had for 80 acres of land. He said, I wouldn't do it. My cow's worth more than that land was.
A Jersey cow and 80 acres?
That's right. So it wasn't worth anything. Now, later years, they cleared it up, just like I said, the Latter-day Saints. People come in there, and they cleared it. We said, what do you mean cleared? Well, you remember now, second growth timber has come up in this. They didn't, when they cut all this timber, they didn't cut every little tree, and there was timber still in there. So you had to cut that down with chainsaws and burn the logs. We didn't worry about keeping them. And that's what you did.
So the second growth of timber that was in here, when people got ready to get rid of that, they just
burned it. Cut it and burned it. For instance, there was a few little mills around where you got second growth cypress, for instance. Second growth cypress sold in the 30s there. We bought it into lumber shed for $17.50 a thousand. Called, and that means you didn't have a crooked 2x4, you didn't have bark on it. But then these people took this, and imagine now, John American had lots of money to invest to get this land all in cultivation, get it people farming on the thing. Then on in later years now, after World War II, then John American went in and sold this land.
Okay.
Gave it to the farmer, an opportunity to buy it, let him buy it, 30 years to pay for it.
Okay. Now, we haven't even gotten to that story, and that's the story we started in to do. But T.A., we'll talk some more, and I want to hear about, if the land's underwater, how in the world they did any surveys and what they did.
To begin with, surveying it, they did out boats.
Okay, now we're going to talk about boats. We're going to have to say, if you're interested in this, you have to stay tuned.
You have been